Welcome, everybody. This is our last WeWick lunch webinar of 2024. We're here with Jessika Greendeer. We're so excited to have her with us and pleased. I'm Jennifer Nelson. I'm the outreach coordinator with WeWick, and I'm glad to be here today. I am going to pass it off to our fearless program director, Esther, and she's going to tell you a little bit about WeWick.
Thank you, Jennifer. Good morning, everybody. We thank you for joining us today. As I get ready to present the slideshow, I just wanted to welcome you all and first of all, thank our speaker today for graciously being here amidst her busy schedule and giving us this time and sharing her thoughts and her work that's so dear to her. So thank you so much, Jessika. And I welcome everybody who is here this morning. Just wanted to take a couple of minutes to share about Wisconsin Women in Conservation and what we are about. This is a program that is funded by NRCS, the Natural Resources Conservation Service Wisconsin, and it is led by the Michael Fields Agricultural Institute in partnership with Marble Seed, Wisconsin Farmers Union, Renewing Their Countryside, and E-Resources Group is our eval partner in this program. What do we do? If many of you know what we do, but there are a few of you who have joined us new today, and so we just wanted to share what we do. We work with women landowners who farm, who are non-operators or beginning farmers. The most important thing that we do is to create a safe space for sharing your stories and connecting with one another. We create the space where you can meet with other women who are passionate about conservation. And then you grow a network of peers and professionals to thrive with. The professionals are something that we bring to the group, and then you can ask your questions, share your thoughts, and so you have them to thrive with. You learn together about conservation practices is like more of a peer-to-peer learning model. And then we provide technical assistance for conservation plans. If anybody is interested in conservation plan for their land, we provide that for free. If you want to go for a car share program, we connect you with NRCS, or if you just want to have a plan on your hand to think about what you want to do on your land, we would provide somebody to come walk your land and give that conservation plan for free. And then thus we create a local community to support and grow together. The tri-counties that we are operational now is listed here: Trompeau, La Crosse, Monroe, Dane, Rock, Jefferson, Green Lake, Columbia, Sauk, Eau Claire, Chippewa, and Clark. These are the counties in which we have in-person events. We finished the programming for 2024. We'll have more programming for 2025. If you live in one of these counties or around, please be on the lookout on our webpage where we'll have events listed next year and be a part of what we do. If you do not, but you still want to be connected with what we do, please go to our website. You can follow us on Facebook, on Pinterest, on Insta. Also, you can sign up for our blog post and also our listserv. So just stay connected with us, and we have a lot of things coming up in 2025. This is our last program for 2024, and we are so grateful once again to Jessika for this. Thank you, and back to you, Jennifer.
Thanks, Esther. Thank you, Esther. Yeah, I'm just rejoining this team after a little hiatus, and I'm grateful to be here, and I'm just really impressed by the work that we've all been doing. Okay, it is my great honor to introduce our speaker for today, and it's been really, really cool to get to know her just a little bit and the work that she's doing. Jessika Greendeer is a world-renowned seed keeper who is a Ho-Chunk Nation tribal member from Baraboo. She's a 10-year U.S. Army combat veteran, and she worked previously as the agricultural division manager for the Ho-Chunk Nation. Now she tends a regenerative seed rematriation farm in Hudson called Little Skies Farm, where building soil is a top commitment with cover crops and compost. She is also a newly elected District 1 legislator with the Ho-Chunk Nation, and she is taking time out of session to be with us today. So we are extra grateful for that. After serving during wartime in Afghanistan and Iraq, Jessika recovered from post-traumatic stress disorder by connecting with agriculture and specifically with seed keeping. She considers it her life work to grow and protect our seed relatives, as well as to train and inspire future seed keepers. I'm going to, Jessika requested that we start her out with a video that kind of covers the, just kind of creates a baseline for her. So here we go.
What is a seed?
Our past, our present, and our future.
Our ancestors, our future generations.
Knowledge and cosmic understanding.
We are humbled by the seeds.
Seeds are what sustain me and my family.
The seeds of my ancestors.
Seeds are our children.
They're creation's children.
Seeds are our culture, our heritage.
Past, our history, and our health.
It's in our DNA. It's in our spirit that we know this.
We need to unite as a Native community to protect the seeds.
We're developing a network of seed stewards, seed keepers, seed growers.
Resources and wisdom together in a big circle.
Teaching, instructing.
Having seed exchanges. It's not only growing good seeds and creating access for them, but it's growing good seed stewards.
Multi-generational activities, carrying on our heritage.
Be self-reliant and self-sufficient.
Nourish those seeds and get them back on the table and into people's lives.
Because it's all about food, right?
You exploit what you merely value, but you defend what you love. And part of the seed sovereignty movement is remembering to love our seeds because they are our relative.
The seed movement is not just the responsibility of the farmers or gardeners in our communities, but it's everyone's responsibility.
Decide what is being planted, where it's being planted, and by whom it's being harvested and gathered and cooked.
From seed to seed, just as our ancestors cared for them.
Corporations want to come in and buy the rights to our homeland's ability to make and keep life.
Nobody owns these seeds. Those seeds are life.
We are who our ancestors dreamed of. We need to be the ancestors to our future generations.
And with that, Jessika, we're excited to hear from you.
Afternoon, everyone. I'm incredibly honored and humbled to be here with you all, and thank you all for taking the time out of your day to spend it here in a virtual circle with us. And I noticed I did see that in the feed as well. I probably should have eaten lunch beforehand because being at some of those gatherings, experiencing the different tastes of how our brothers and sisters from many nations across both Americas are able to transition these amazing gifts that our seeds, plants, plant life and wildlife are providing and nourishing us in so many different ways. So not only is it to nourish our appetites, but also to nourish our spirit. And so, yeah, maybe next time we'll do a virtual potluck. But my name is Jessika Greendeer. My Ho-Chunk name or my given name is Gisada Sada Chwaninga Ingaide. I have, when I was asked to be a part of this, I know there are many ways to be able to, there are many things in my life that I had to be at the forefront of. And what I found the beautiful part about farming and conservation is every time that you are working in the garden, with our seeds, with our trees, but spending that time with the earth, you get to reflect and just be yourself. You get to let go of all of your responsibilities for just a moment to be sort of in church or in ceremony with yourself, and an opportunity for learning, observing, contemplating, reflecting. I think all of those different things that many of you on this call are very familiar with. The one part that I never thought of, I thought farming was something I could hide into. And it turns out that that's not the case. But I want to I think of the person I was 10 years ago. I think of the healing that I needed at that time and not knowing where to go. I would take all of my prescribed medications from the Department of Veteran Affairs, and I was not myself. I was certainly not the person who left home to join the military. And when I came home, I was not quite sure how to reintegrate into the civilian life. Through following the recommended programs through the Department of Veteran Affairs, I found farming, or maybe farming found me. I was floating around on their website, and there was a veteran to farmer training program that I landed upon. And so after moving back home from North Carolina and separating from the Army, I moved to Pennsylvania and learned how to become a regenerative organic farmer through the Rodale Institute. It was during that time that there were many of the practices that we label as regenerative or organic, and amazing land stewardship practices are practices that Indigenous people have done since time immemorial. And this is not to stake a claim. I'm just making sure that a lot of those practices are time-honored traditions. And I'm amazed and in awe of as an Arikara friend had told me, our grandmother scientists, to think about all of the things that they did in an effort to better take care of the earth, but also knowing that all of the work that they were doing was not just for them or to feed their people at that moment, but it was also to know that we would have something left to be able to feed our future generations. And in honor of, the work of our grandmother scientists, but also all of those ancestors that we descend from, that they had always thought about us in everything that they did. And it may not appear that way. I know it may not appear that way, but there are also so many people, many of them who were shown on that video, who are continuing to do that work across Turtle Island. And, to know of all the uphill challenges we have moving forward, it is still a time to be optimistic. There are still many things that we have today that we can be very grateful for. And I hope that this will encourage you to continue to steward, cultivate, and, re-energize all of those different things that continue to push you forward every single day. As we're, thinking about earth stewardship, and I wanted to ask that question because I think many of us do the things that we do because somebody either told us that it was a good idea, or we were sitting in a room and we heard about a different initiative, or we were reading somewhere that, this institution or this tribe or this nation of people are trying to do this particular effort. And it's something that we want to try on our own. And I, of course, think that's much of our ancestors working behind the scenes to make sure that we're doing what we're supposed to be doing, but also continuing to teach us if we're open to understanding and listening to that. When I started my farming journey, Dr. Chris Nichols was my soil guru, you know, talking about soil health, soil management, soil conservation, all of things soil. And I remember her asking, like, who is here to become a farmer? Who's here to grow food? It's like, of course, we're all going to raise our hands. This is what we're here for. She's like, you're all wrong. You are here to build soil. You're here to, you know, focus on building the soil, rebuilding the soil, regenerating the soil, so that way you can grow healthy food, nutrient-dense food, and all of those things. So, of course, you know, you can think about that and be like, oh yeah, of course, why wouldn't you start with the source? And so just in the short amount of time that I've been stewarding the earth where I reside, is I had a lawn that I did not want to be mowing, and knew that there were other ways or other things that the earth would want to help grow, with the exception, you know, besides like some fescue or some grass. And I want to apologize to the grass, like there's a reason for them too. But, you know, I wanted to focus on a place where I could grow food, not only for myself, but for those around me, or, you know, in many cases for people within my nation, but also people outside of my nation or other tribes. I've been able to, you know, continue to do the work of conservation on my own, on that own piece of earth that I steward. And I have seen, you know, the decrease in invasive non-native plants and trees who once thrived there. And this year I saw katydids, I saw different pests that normally would have debilitated the crops that are growing. But many of those pests, or those garden pests like squash vine borers or the corn rootworm bug, they had flown through and continued to fly away. And I'll knock on wood, I'll continue to do my best to make sure that I'm doing what I need to do to take care of the earth. So that way she will continue to take care of me. And it's not necessarily, that almost sounds selfish by saying it in that way, but we have to remember that we are in, you know, we need to be in reciprocity with one another. Not only as we would respect or expect that same respect from people we interact with. You know, our grandmother Earth has been damaged and hurt and abused by her children, who are us. And we may not be the culprits of, you know, the working toward maybe causing that damage, but how can we repair our relationship with our grandmother? She continues to nourish us, not only our, you know, human beings or two-leggeds, but also all of the wildlife, the insects, the birds, the so many other life forms that we see that are either seen or unseen. And I think of, in a short amount of time, what I've been able to remove from my little ecosystem and what I've been able to encourage has been very, very hopeful for me. It is a lot of work, and I know many of you around on this call today understand how much work it is. And so I also applaud all of you. It's one of those unsung hero things where it's like we're trying to do what's best, not knowing what's coming, but also preparing ourselves to continue to feed each other and feed ourselves going forward. So I learned up front that I needed to be a good soil steward, and knowing that if I took care of the earth, she would help take care of the seeds that I would place into her womb. And there are beautiful things that we are able to observe when we slow ourselves down, and direct our attention to thinking about the beginning of life. As humans, it's the way I've explained it to some of the youth that I've worked with in the past is that if there is a man and a woman trying to create a baby, we don't necessarily invite ourselves into that room to observe that. And it's depending on the age of the youth, it'd be like, ew, gross, and they wouldn't want to talk about it or think about it anymore. But there are those little points of intimacy within our plant relatives that show us that they have sacrificed themselves to go back into the earth, and their one goal is to complete an entire life cycle within one growing season. And we're able to see them grow as babies, and some of them crawling and then walking, like our bush or our bush beans, to see them just how vigorous they can be and how incredibly generous our plants are. And this is plants all, plants in general, not just the seeds that we plant. So working with the earth, understanding the tree of life within the earth, I actually not understanding it, knowing of the tree of life within the earth, it helped me reconnect to the things that I needed to heal within myself, to make me feel human again. And there are many things within my culture that women are not able to do. Or I don't want to say that, sounds like it's such a negative connotation. There are reasons why we have our way of life, and I respect that. When I came home from war was the first time that I had asked my father a question, and he said, "Oh yeah, you can do that." And that was not a candid response that I normally receive from my father. It was, he always had a reason why, or a story to make sure that not only did I understand, his response to the question, but also being able to tie that in culturally to know exactly why things were a certain way or why they were done a certain way. And he's like, yeah, you can if you want to. And I was like, okay, well, do you think I should? And he's like, oh, you can do whatever you want. If that's what you think is right, you should do that. And again, not the response I had hoped to hear from him. And he's like, you have to remember that you have to know that when you came home, I no longer have the right to tell you what to do. And growing up traditionally the way I did, that was never something that I had prepared myself for, or thinking that I would ever have the opportunity to do, or see within my lifetime. And I held on to that. I didn't know what I wanted to do. And I thought, if I'm going to do anything that I know is right, or what I think is right, or to be able to fight for something that I think is important, then I want to make sure it's very, very important. And I didn't want to cheapen that gift or that blessing that I received by anything. And I would be in deep thought about, like, is this really something worth all of that? And generally I came into, well, you know, somebody else is already doing that, so I don't need to, you know, that's not something of interest to me. When I returned from Pennsylvania, there were seeds that my father had saved and he had shared with different tribal community members. And the beautiful part about it was that it would always happen on a new moon. And I would be working within our community garden spaces or going to different community functions. And there would be other Ho-Chunks there. And it would come as a coffee can or a jar. And those were seeds that some of our tribal members were no longer able to grow, whether it was due to a lack of land access or, you know, they were older and they didn't have somebody younger coming behind them to be able to grow those seeds. But some of those seeds that they shared with me were seeds that they carried within their families, and also seeds that my dad had shared with people, knowing that he was going to start his journey into the next world, and those seeds needed to stay here. It was upon receiving so many of those different jars and different containers or vessels that our seeds were, my ancestral seeds were housed within, that I looked at the seeds and I thought of how amazing it was to be able to carry something and hold something in my hand that my ancestors had held in their hand as well. And those seeds woke up a part of me. You know, there was a part of me that started becoming whole again and started healing just by being in their presence. And I looked at them and I said, I would give my life for you. And I will do everything I can to ensure that you will always grow and that I will make space for you and I will take care of you. But also that I am yours. And it's been a beautiful relationship since. You know, reconnecting with my own ancestral seeds. And, you know, maybe some of you on this call think of a seed as an object, an inanimate object, or something that we just put in the ground or put in the earth or a flat or whatever. But those seeds are life. Just as the video had sort of opened with, you know, that's a living being. And I know Neo-Western verbiage refers to them as germ or germplasm. And I'm like, gross. That's such a, that is not a word that is in the best alignment for everything that those plants do for us. Everything that they provide to us on a daily basis, whether that's our nourishment, our clothing, other fibers in this world. But they're my relatives. They're living beings and they've nourished my people since before we were Ho-Chunk, is what I think of. Many of those seeds, you know, corn, beans, and squash specifically, you know, they were in the Americas. They've been in the Americas before they were called the Americas, but also, you know, since time immemorial, they've been in relationship with Indigenous peoples. And they have, you know, not only made their way from the southern tip of what is now South America to the northern rift of what is now North America, there's evidence, scientific evidence or archaeological evidence that there were wild rice remnants found in clay pots at the tip of South America, but that also there were evidence of cacao or chocolate found within archaeological digs of North America. And so long before 1492, our foods traveled. And it wasn't necessarily about commercially selling, commercially purchasing. Many of those things were traded. And it was not only to, all of it was for our continued existence of people, whether those were foods that were brought into different ceremonies or cultural events of significance, but they had a place because we had a relationship with them. I think back to the very first time growing corn. It was an adventure. As Native people, we walk in two worlds. We walk in the mainstream world that we see here now every day, but we also have own traditional ways of being or ways of being, and which keeps us connected to who we are and where we come from or who we come from. But the one thing that we've continued to forget or remember is about the foods that accompanied us. We can reconnect to so many different aspects of our cultures, either through language or ceremonies and all of those things. And those are amazing efforts that continue to happen around many Indigenous communities across Turtle Island. The part that we maybe, and it's not necessarily because we've forgotten, it's because part of that was taken from us. The parallel between the boarding school era of North America, which was, ending not even 100 years ago, but many of our seeds were taken from community members and put into museums or institutions. Some of them were traded with other tribes, which that's how we continued to ensure each other were fed. But that was a part of our existence that was removed. We often, or there are movements around Turtle Island, as well as in the First Nations of Canada, for the reconciliation of all of that. And we have to be able to take a step back and know that when our children or our ancestors were being removed from their homes to be assimilated into the mainstream culture, that the other things that left were our seeds. And we continue to talk about the healing, the intergenerational healing that needs to take place in order for us to work through the grief or have the time to grieve. And our seeds that were taken are also in need of that healing. It is incredibly heartbreaking to feel a damaged seed in your hand. And it's like hugging a child who maybe fell off their bike. They're hurt or they're shaking or they're crying. And all you can do is hold them to comfort them. And I think about what we've experienced apart. But we've moved into this beautiful era of where we are coming together. For the last few years, there have been efforts to work towards seed rematriation or rematriation in general. Many people are familiar with repatriation and what that means, but rematriation is a part of Native women also reclaiming our responsibilities that we've had since time immemorial to be able to continue to move forward and take up the responsibilities that maybe were taken from us at one point in time due to colonization. There are institutions and public seed companies who either have royalty programs that they're using to help support or send funding back to communities of origin or tribal communities of origin. And there are all of those things which are very great, but it's time for our relatives to be reunited with us. There are a handful of Native peoples across the Americas who are reconnecting and being reunited with their own ancestral seed. And, it's a huge win. It's huge. It's huge for Native people to be able to find their relatives, some of them who have been living in a jar or an envelope or in a shadow box, a display, some of our corn relatives wearing a toe tag and not being honored or respected in the way that they deserve. There have been rematriation efforts that have been happening, and those efforts are not often publicized, but we've come to a time that whether you're looking at climate change or climate chaos, as well as an incoming administration into this country, what are the things that we need to do? How can we best prepare ourselves and prepare each other? There's a lot of unknowns out there right now. And unfortunately, I don't have the answers for you. However, I do know that we all, regardless of the languages that our ancestors spoke, we've come to a time that we need to be working together. We've come to the time that we need to trust each other or have a trust. And it's scary to think about what's happening. And even reading, the possibilities of moving into genetically engineered farming or agriculture is scary. All of the seeds that many of us grow, whether they're ancestral seeds or heirloom or open pollinated, what are the threats to our seed relatives moving forward? And I don't have that answer for you. But what I do know is that for Indigenous peoples, it's about being able to continue to carry on the way that we know to steward the earth, to be able to care for the earth in the way that we feel that she needs to be cared for. And that is not, how to steward the earth is not a decision up to me. That's something within each tribe that they have their own teachings and wisdoms, and being able to be respectful of the methods that they use, and the reason why behind it. This is also not a commercial. I know for some of you who've been on calls with me before, you know, this is not a commercial for everybody to start growing corn, beans, and squash, or rather even potatoes, tomatoes, and peppers, all of those different relatives, who came from the Americas before they were taken from their people and put on ships and fed to other people around the world. This is a time where we all need to know where we came from. I also wanted to lift that up for all of the seeds that are not indigenous to the Americas, that they also are waiting for us or waiting for you to rescue them and to have a relationship with them. I'm grateful for the opportunity to work with our indigenous seeds and being able to grow them, share them, and feed people with them. But we've come to a time that we do have to work, and it's not a demand, but only a request. Finding ways that we can support one another for all of our continued existence. And this is not, a couple weeks ago, I think this is not the conversation I was hoping to be having with you all. And knowing, I'm going to continue to use the rest of the time for seed rematriation, I promise. But back in 2018, I was invited to Seed Savers Exchange, along with some other Indigenous seed stewards and allies, to talk about what seed rematriation looks like. And the leadership at the time, they had Indigenous board members who were also in support or had asked if that was a possibility to start taking the Indigenous seeds within their collection and taking it off of their catalogs, and begin to start sharing sharing those seeds back with their home communities. And it was a 2-day event. I was only able to be there one day. And both myself and Diane Wilson, who at the time was the executive director of Dream of Wild Health in the Twin Cities. She's also an amazing writer, and did write a book about novel about seed keepers, short stories, which I highly recommend if you're, for something in other perspectives to think about. But yeah, we walked away from the dinner and I was like, I'm very grateful we had the opportunity to be here. But I wish there were Ho-Chunk seeds that were on that list, or Ho-Chunk seeds that were being grown that could come home. And she said, you know what, I feel the same way. She's Dakota. And she's like, but you're right. Glad we got to be here. And, both of us left to go back to our respective homes. And then I got a text message the next day. And, from one of my mentors, Rowan White. And she had sent me a text and said, that one seed that's called this, which was not tied to a tribe. She's like, it looks like it might be Winnebago. And my heart dropped. And I was incredibly stoked to think that there was even that possibility. I was shared seed, and I was shared one of the fruits of the harvest. And unfortunately, within that harvest, it was not edible anymore. It had been, it had cured, but it had sat for a very long time and was no longer edible. But I was able to grow that seed in 2019. And in 2019, the seed was grown. And the beautiful thing about squash is that you're able to eat the fruit and still save the seeds. And I had an intern who was having a farewell lunch, and I was like, you know what? One of those Ho-Chunk squash are ready. So I'm going to contribute that to the potluck. And at the time, our chef in residence was Chef Brian Yazzie. And he's like, how do you want me to cook it? I was like, according to the Oscar Wilde catalog of 1927, that squash is very good for baking. And that's it. That's all it says. And so he's like, okay, I'm not going to do anything to it. I'm just going to roast it in the oven, and people can eat it that way. And as soon as we started to, I shared it with the Dream of Wild Health staff as well as our youth. And it was like, oh my God, this is the best tasting squash that I have ever had in my entire life. And no offense to all of the amazing squash out there. But having a bite of that squash, I could feel my spirit nourished. And I think many of us have a story that we can reconnect with a food that we have, fond memories of just, all the feel goods, all of the good things that come with it, or the, no tomato is ever going to taste as good as the one that comes out of your backyard. But that squash nourished us. And I don't know the last time a Ho-Chunk person had ingested that squash or had tasted the fruits of that squash. But that was not lost on me. And, to this day, I still continued to steward that squash, and even have shared that squash seed since, and even had requests like, can I, is there any chance I can get one of those squash? So it's been, that's just one story of rematriation. And there, luckily, with continued efforts, there continue to be those stories that are emerging every single season. I would encourage you all to, if there are seed libraries that are within your space, I would encourage you to, participate in those seed exchange programs or seed library programs. I would also encourage you, if you're using, purchasing your seed from anywhere, that you do pay attention to the way that they market their indigenous seeds, as well as how they're giving back or rematriating seeds moving forward. There's not enough time.
Jessika, if you want to take a few more minutes, we could listen to you talk all day, but feel free. Do you want to talk just a few more minutes, or do you want to take questions?
Actually, I'll just say one more thing. Thank you. So, the story of the squash, but it was, there has been work done with, a nonprofit seed house within the Midwest. And there were seeds that came out of their collection and back to their tribal communities. All of this work is very slow work. I have to remain hopeful. And I know there are some people on the call, like Dr. Kauth, who's familiar. But, there are efforts being made, but there are more efforts to be made. There were lots of miles that I put on my truck to visit tribal communities across Turtle Island, to try and get their seed back to them. And some seed had been old, so I was able to grow some of them at my home farm this year to be able to just freshen them up before going home again. There was a successful rematriation coming out of the Science Museum of Minnesota. There is with the changes in NAG Press since last December, there have been lots of movement forward to create ethical collections across the country. And I would encourage my Native brothers and sisters on this call to be able to connect with those resources or sources within your communities to see what things are happening. To see, you know, maybe even if it's something of a thought. Of course, there's always balance. There's good and bad, or not good and bad, positive, negative, whatever you may want to call it, left and right. There are seeds, cultural objects, cultural items, sacred items that have been taken from us at some point, generally within the last 100 years, that are sitting in a place that's either dark, dry, and cold, and that have not heard their language spoken to them in many decades. I guess the moment of, or the part of caution is knowing that maybe just because we can doesn't mean we should. And so, you know, for my Native brothers and sisters on this call, I'd encourage you that if there are pieces of your culture that need to be picked up, maybe you're the right person, or maybe there's somebody coming behind us, our next generation, who you can bring along to help encourage the passing of our traditional ways of knowing to each other. And for everybody on the call, if you know, with the seeds that you steward, whether they're food or cover crop, whatever you might be growing and stewarding, and, you know, or maybe you're waiting for a reconnection to seeds that were taken from our ancestors, and now's the time for us to be able to help them find their way back into the earth, so they can complete their purpose in this world. And it's just like bringing home a newborn baby. We have to have a car seat. And I think even now you have to have the hospital make sure that your car seat is effective and all of those things, or properly buckled. But there are many things that we need to do as human beings that we also need to be ready to accept that gift back. And so it's not easy, but it's worth it. And so just, yeah, wanting to remind you all, it's also about making sure that we remember that we're bringing another life into our homes, and we need to not take that responsibility lightly. And
I feel like we
4 more hours, Jennifer.
I feel like we could just listen to you all day. I'm sure I'm speaking for everybody. Thank you so much for sharing your story. It's so beautiful. And I love to think about our plant relatives and what that means, you know, for many of us, just like that's a paradigm shift, right? And it's a new way of being and thinking, and I'm grateful. Yeah. So we're gonna, if you have questions, Jessica, are you able to stay a little bit longer? Great. So if you would put your questions in the chat, I will do my best to help share those. And I just want to say thank you to those of you who joined us a little later. We had some Zoom issues going on earlier on, but we will record this and share this. So, so this will be a wonderful resource for many years to come. All right. So please just, if you have questions, put those in the chat. You know, I just wanted to come back to the just the answers to the question at the beginning. What are you doing now to become a good ancestor? And I love that. And I saw a lot about like soil building and also breaking trauma patterns in families. And I don't know if you could just speak to that a little bit, Jessica. I think it's so it's so important to think about the health of our earth with the health of us, right? Could you speak to that a little bit?
Yeah, absolutely. You know, there are lots of different reports that are coming out or that have been coming out in regards to the nutrient deficiencies within our food. And I think we have more in common with the earth than we think. All of the different micronutrients or macronutrients that the earth needs to be able to produce nutrient-rich foods is the exact same things that we need as human beings. And I think when we start thinking of it in that way, it does change our perspective on like, oh my God, like if I'm doing this for myself, like I also have to be a good community member or in community with the earth of this is what you need, this is what I need, and being able to say like, and this is what I need in my food. So making sure that we're taking care of all of those microscopic forms of life that help ensure we have good foods, good healthy foods. I don't know if that's helpful, but yeah, hope that kind of answers it.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, I think that is a huge connection that is so important. So we have some great resources going up in the chat, and I don't see, do we have any questions coming in? I don't see any questions, but maybe they just don't even know where to begin. Right. Somebody just said that you have taught this person to pause and listen and to consider seed sovereignty as food sovereignty. And that is so powerful. I also really appreciated your the story of your father and just your heartfelt way of sharing that with us. That is just really meaningful. And I think I'm just so grateful that you've been able to share his good work. That's wonderful. Okay, we do have a question here. The book by Diane Wilson, I think, is earlier. If somebody could put that in the chat again, that has been linked earlier. There we go. And then how can we best address microplastics in our soil?
Oh, that's a great question. That's very difficult, not impossible, but very difficult. I think it's almost easier to address the heavy metals within soil than it is microplastics. I would encourage people to, depending on the soil that they steward or reside on, if there are threats to different contaminations or pollutants, I would more encourage you to do raised beds. And that way you do have an idea of like what that looks like. There are many plants, either, indigenous to the Americas or around the world, that are excellent for phytoremediators. And I think, depending on what you have currently growing or maybe thriving, is also a good soil health indicator. So like when you have more of a acidic or alkaline, or even a depending on the plants, I don't call them weeds, so I'm saying plants, but it's plants that we haven't understood their purpose, or maybe the plants who volunteer to show themselves in our gardens, but many of them are still medicinal and edible in their own way. And some of them are there to help with compaction of the soil. So yeah, I would go with raised beds if pollutants are a problem within the soil.
So we have a question from Lana. If there is one way our non-native community, is there a way our non-native community could support the matriation of seeds?
Yeah, That's a great question. And so something I've actually been faced with in the last, I think Indigenous peoples have been doing this since time immemorial. I think, it's twofold. One, we don't require saviors, and we appreciate people's help, but like there are many things that we can still do on our own. The second thing, which I think is most beneficial, is when we are not at a table, asking why there are not Indigenous people around that table, being able to speak on our behalf, but making sure you're opening the door for Indigenous people to be parts of those communications and efforts going forward. Because unfortunately, I could, just for example, you and I could be having a conversation and we could say the exact same words scripted, and there will be people who can hear your voice and other people who will hear mine. And so making sure that we're all working together, I think, is the best way to move forward.
Yeah, thank you for that. We have a question about raised beds. Do you recommend a soil source for raised beds?
Ooh, depends on where you're at. There are also additional environmental considerations when you're thinking about, the jumping worm, depending on where you're at, other things that may be living in the soil, but throughout the state of Wisconsin and of course elsewhere, there are very good, many of them smaller operations who are focused on making sure that they have either the right animal components going in, as well as all of the plant components going in. So I don't want to say names. There's a great Wisconsin-based place, or there's like two great Wisconsin-based places that you can look at, and there's an amazing one in the New England states. So I hope that helps. But I do want to mention with the raised beds, I also incorporated hugelkulturing into my raised bed systems. So instead of my raised beds are approximately 2 feet tall, I have that hugelkulture system within it. And then I've got a whole lot less soil to have to fill as well.
Yes, thank you. And you can Google hugelkulture. Maybe somebody can put a link in the chat. So just a couple more questions. First, we have a request for the squash name. Are you willing to share the name of the special Winnebago squash?
So I will tell you, she is not found within, she is not for sale. She's not found within other organizations or entities. I will say, like that, the most challenging part about rematriation is along the lines of how those seeds either left Native communities, either taken or gifted, ended up getting renamed afterward. So many of them have different names that they go by. And so it's incredibly important to show that seed, or see how familiar it is with this person or where that seed was collected from, knowing the region, knowing the tribes who were there, either pre and post removals. There's a lot of history that goes into finding the original names of those seeds. But that particular seed was collected from Winnebago, Nebraska in 1914.
So cool. Thank you. Okay, 2 more questions. Can you do 2 more?
Yes.
Okay. First of all, we have a question about seed companies that people can use that are best for rematriation.
I don't know if I'm able to do this. Okay, well, Fedco does have an Indigenous royalties program. I would also encourage people to, there are multiple lists out there, but BIPOC-led seed companies that are out there, and they're, generally smaller based. I would support the work of that. I also don't want to, I'm guilty. I don't want to say guilty. I do it myself where there's like, oh my God, this looks super cool from Johnny's. And so I'll pay what I need to be able to try this out. But, as we continue to move forward as human beings who need to eat, I would highly encourage you to find those open pollinated varieties, heirloom varieties of seed to be able to save your seed every year and become more self-reliant.
Yes, thank you. And then one last question. Do you recommend a simple soil testing kit?
Ooh, good question. So I don't test my soil. I use Indigenous knowledge to see what's happening. And what some people call weeds. I think of like plant health indicators, watching the growth of not only the babies that you planted, but the babies who show up on their own, tell you a lot about your soil. And I also feel I have done soil tests. I do not have one I recommend, but I feel like it's also part of that extraction of earth by saying, I'm going to see if you're good enough to do this. I think by the looks of things, we can always tell maybe what's needed. We just need to slow ourselves down and be more observant and also trust our own instincts. There's a lot of things that we know to be true or maybe to be a problem that we can address. And there's lots of information out there to help fine tune, like what does that mean? So yeah, that's what I would recommend.
I love that. Thank you. Well, I want to be respectful of your time. I know you have to go back to your session, but I just want to say thank you on behalf of WeWick. This has been an invaluable hour with you, and we appreciate your experience and your sharing and all of it. Thank you. Thank you so much. I also just thank you. I also just wanted to remind everybody, Mercedes is putting some links in the chat. We have our spring WeWick Educator Conference in Stevens Point next year, April 25th, 2025. So you'll see some more information coming on that. We have a podcast, which is really wonderful, and that is on our website, and you can access it there. We have a listserv, which is a great kind of grassroots way to connect with people. And then we also have a blog that has some additional information on what we're doing at WeWick. So yeah, thank you all for attending today and being with us through all of it. And thank you to Jessika Greendeer for your work and your sharing and your just continued good work.